Good morning, Rebels. I'm Landon, and today we're going to talk about writing drum parts in different genres of music. First, I want to cover some important concepts before we dive into a few examples. First would be drum choice or sample choice. You'll hear a lot in music production that you need to get it right at the source. This means that sound design is an important part of the process and makes a big difference on determining the end result for whatever you're working with. It helps to use reference tracks to familiarize yourself with the genre that you're working in. Keep an ear out for the different elements of percussion and how it's being used. For example, if you're trying to make your drop really slap, you need beefy kick and snare samples. It doesn't matter how hard you hit the wrong sample. If the sound isn't right, it's just not going to work for you. So sound design is an important part of the creative process. If you're writing in a genre that normally features a live kit, you might want to consider getting some software that helps emulate an actual drum kit. I recommend Addictive Drums, but there are a lot of great options out there on the market. When you're recording an actual kit, you're actually hearing a number of different sound sources that create the overall drum sound. You'll have the close mics that capture the attack and the detail of the hits, you'll have overheads that capture more of the body, and then you'll have room mics that capture the ambience of both the drum kit and where it's being played. Many producers will actually layer their acoustic kit with additional samples, primarily on the kick and snare. This is used to create consistency and bring in characteristics that the natural drums might lack. This is done through a process called drum triggering, where you use an audio source to trigger the sample. Once you have your kit and sounds designed, you'll want to think about playing style. Some genres are very rigid in their timing and lock everything precisely to a grid, but with human players, you typically have some degree of variance. Playing to a click is important in drumming, because people have gotten used to consistency and tempo. You can still maintain a human feel while playing to a click. It's common practice to edit drum performances after the fact to clean up their timing. But as with sound design, you still want to try to get it right at the source. You'll save yourself a lot of time and headache down the road. If you're writing in MIDI, you don't have to worry so much about this, but it's still important to keep a mind out for how a human player might actually approach the drums that you're writing in the song. Sometimes you may want to push or pull the beat. This means you'll play either slightly faster or slower than the exact timing of the click. This will create a difference in how the drum part is perceived by the listener. You can do this to make things feel either a bit more rushed or a bit more laid back, depending on what you're going for. A lot of genres have conventional tempos, but it's still good practice to dial this in by feel for whatever track that you're working on. Even small differences like 1 or 2 BPM can make a difference both on how the song sounds and how it feels to play. It's important to think about where you're placing accents, especially if your song has lyrics. Depending on what your song calls for, you may want more or less movement. Sometimes keeping it simple is the best course of action. You'll also want to think about where you need to place drum fills. These are typically at the end of sections, roughly every 4 to 8 bars, and they help add a lot of interest to the arrangement. An easy way to add variance throughout the arrangement is to just simply vary your cymbal choice. Maybe you're playing on a closed hi-hat through the verse. Consider opening it up a bit for the chorus. Or maybe switch over to a ride cymbal or crash cymbal. Or maybe don't play cymbals at all. They're all valid options and they make a difference to how the beat feels, so just try out different options and see what you like. You can also vary your subdivisions. Like if you're playing eighth notes, try cutting back to quarter notes and see how that feels. The kick and snare pattern are the fundamental core of the beat, so any other changes that you make aren't going to affect the groove quite as much. Sometimes you may want to change things up entirely. This will affect all the other instruments in your arrangement though, so be mindful of that whenever you're making changes. Lastly, it's important to remember that music is subjective. Conventions are there to help, but at the end of the day, rules are made to be broken. So do what feels right, have fun, try new things, and just explore ideas. That's where the magic happens. With pop grooves, they're often pretty simple, but that doesn't mean they need to be boring. Depending on your flavor of pop, you can get by with either acoustic drums, electronic drums, or even both. You want your snare to be present, but keep it simple, just accenting 2 and 4, without a lot of ghost notes. You can add interest by adding some subtle variety to the hi-hat. You want your kick to be heard, but doesn't need to be overbearing. The drums should always serve the song, so make sure you give space to the other instruments, but keep an ear out for places where you can fill space in the arrangement. Rock music is all about being loud. You want your kick and snare to punch you in the face. You can be more liberal with crash cymbals and draw more attention. Think about how your drums will interact with the bass and rhythm guitars. Maybe you can complement their groove with your kick placement. The rhythm section is a team in rock music. You still want to be mindful of dynamics though. Maybe hold back a bit during the verses so the chorus can hit harder. Punk is pretty fast. A lot of the same rules apply from rock music, but you want to place more of an emphasis on timing than dynamics. But it's still important to be consistent. This is a good example of where people will often push the beat a bit. Punk drumming can be kept simple or made more complex. It's really a stylistic choice. Human players often sacrifice a bit of their loudness when playing fast kick patterns, so it's good to keep this in mind when writing parts in MIDI. Keeping all of your MIDI velocities consistent isn't going to sound very natural. On the opposite end of the spectrum, hip-hop is usually slower. Electronic drums are more common than acoustic, but both can work. You'll often see a lot of intricate hi-hat patterns. The snare is still very important, but the kick is used more for creating the pulse and movement of the groove. It can also be tuned and played more as a bass in terms of 808s and sub-bass that's popular in the genre. You'll see all sorts of different drum samples used in hip-hop, many of which are aggressively processed. Next we have dance music. This is characterized by its 4-on-the-floor kick and consistent pulse. Electronic drums are the way to go here, as acoustic kits don't lend themselves very well to this kind of music. You'll usually want everything locked pretty well to the grid. You can create interest here by layering on top of the beat. It's also common to play something against the beat like an open hi-hat. This is known as a disco beat. You'll want to practice making 4 to 8 bar build sections, because these are staples within the genre. Drum and bass is often built with existing loops or breakbeats from records, but also lends itself nicely to electronic drums. Consistency and repetition are important here. The drums are a core component of tracks in this genre, so you really want them tight and punchy. Try to keep the accents simple. Too much movement can end up sounding cluttered and distracting, but you can place a busier top layer to create more rhythmic interest. There you have it, guys. How to write drums for 6 different genres. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments below, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.